Presented by Accountantsworld. My name is Div Bensali. I'm a Vice President at Accountantsworld. And joining us today is Samantha Mansfield of CPAcom. She'll be speaking on professionalization of client accounting advisory services. Before we get started, just wanted to once again thank you for joining us today. A couple of tips for GoToWebinar. If you haven't used the GoToWebinar control panel recently, you can use the orange arrow to expand or hide the panel. So if you're not seeing the GoToWebinar control panel at all right now, you should be looking for an orange arrow to go ahead and expand that out. Once you open it, if you'd like to select a different audio option, you can choose to listen via computer speakers or dial in via phone. If you select phone call, it'll give you a dial-in number and an access code as well. If you haven't yet downloaded Samantha's handouts for today's presentation, you can go to the Handouts tab, and you'll see the PDF there for professionalization of client accounting advisory services, and you can follow along with her as you go through it. And finally, if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to go ahead and write those in. Samantha and I will be on the lookout for questions that are coming in, and we'll try to get to those as soon as we can. If not during the presentation, then certainly immediately after the presentation. We do offer one CP for today's webinar, and that's based on active participation during the live presentation. So active participation is demonstrated by responding to all three of the poll questions today, attending the live webinar for no less than 50 minutes, and once you close out of the webinar today, you'll see a window pop up, browser window with the post-webinar survey. So please go ahead and fill out that post-webinar survey and submit that. If you don't see the survey window open up, no worries. We'll send you a link via email afterwards as well, and you can use that. You only need to submit it one way or the other. And CP certificates will be emailed within 2 to 3 business days after our webinar today. As I mentioned, today is another in the series of webinars being offered as part of the 2017 Expert Webinar Series. Accountantsworld puts this on every year, and this year has been bigger and better than ever. We're bringing together accounting's most innovative minds with one goal in mind, which is to help you to grow your practice and move your practice forward. Our next webinar will be coming up in 4 weeks on Wednesday, September 20th. That one will be at 3 p.m. Eastern rather than 2 p.m. Eastern. It'll be presented by Hitendra Patel. I know many of you have read his Accountantsworld post on CPA trend lines, as well as on his LinkedIn profile and elsewhere. He'll be presenting on 8 uncommon success practices of entrepreneurial accountants. If you haven't yet signed up for the rest of the Expert Webinar Series this year, please go to awwebinars.com and you can sign up for all of them at one time. I think we have 4 of them left after this one, 4 or 5. So I encourage you to go ahead and sign up for those if you haven't already done so. A brief word about our sponsor, Accountantsworld. Accountantsworld brings you the full power of the cloud. We've been doing cloud computing solutions for accountants for 15 years, or as we like to say, longer than the term cloud computing has existed. And our mission is really simple. We use cloud technology to help accountants to grow their practices by regaining control over accounting and payroll services. Our goal is to work with you and use both technology and support to help you to get more profitability, client satisfaction, and better retention through accounting and payroll. We also differ from most other software providers because we put accountants first. We never sell any of our solutions directly to end clients. We only sell them to accountants who can then brand them and customize them for the needs of their office and their clients. Accountantsworld's core products in accounting and flagship accounting and payroll have both been recognized by CPA Practice Advisor with 5-star ratings. If you'd like to learn more about us, go to accountantsworld.com and you can sign up for our upcoming webinars as well as learn more about our solutions. Speaking of upcoming webinars, we have a recurring webinar series. We do this webinar every week about payroll. And whether your biggest payroll processing challenge is low profit margins or compliance headaches, those are the 2 that we often hear from accountants across the country who are offering payroll services. Payroll Relief from Accountantsworld can help you to resolve both of those. And so in this webinar, we'll show you how to automate your payroll processing to an unprecedented degree. We'll show you how to eliminate data entry and check printing in your office and consistently earn $3 to $5 per paycheck. If you'd like to sign up for our payroll webinar, just go to accountantsworld.com/payroll to get to our payroll relief page, and then you'll see a link for attend a webinar. I'd like to, in a minute, turn it over here to Samantha Mansfield. A quick introduction. Samantha is the Director of Professional Development and Community at CPAcom. Samantha is passionate about helping public accounting professionals leverage technology to grow their businesses. Samantha has been recognized as one of the top 100 most influential people in accounting. And she also, I didn't have this up here, but she's made the CPA Practice Advisor's 40 under 40 list the past 2 years. And breaking news, we just found out that she also made it again a third year in a row. That just came out yesterday. So Samantha, welcome and congratulations.
Thank you so much. Excellent. Well, I greatly appreciate being invited to participate in this expert webcast series and really be able to share this topic with all of you. When we get talking about the professionalization of client accounting services, this is something that I have been speaking with firms about for years. And what I find incredibly exciting is that at this point where we are, there is so much activity that's happening, and we're really seeing an evolution of this service line in firms. You'll notice that there's quite a bit being said in the media, and that's not just in the trades for the accounting profession, but I'm seeing articles in Forbes and Wall Street Journal and other organizations or media, I guess I should say in general, that really are emphasizing how client accounting today can be more about advisory services and what that value is both to the firm as well as the businesses that your firms serve. What is also wonderful about this time is that it's giving firms an opportunity to really redefine, redesign, and resell their accounting services. With the furtherance of cloud-based technology, it has very much changed the dynamic and the relationship between the accountant and their clients, and it's giving you a chance now to be able to scale advisory services with true profitability and growth. And we're going to get into many details on that by focusing on some of the trends that are driving this change, as well as then what are the stages of being able to develop a mature client accounting advisory practice. So a little on me was just introduced. If you would like to see some additional articles and so forth, I do post about this a fair amount on my Twitter account, so that handle is here, but we will keep going. So hopefully you know a little bit why I am part of this conversation here today. And as it was mentioned, I am with CPA.com. If you're not familiar with CPA.com, we are the technology subsidiary of the AICPA. We focus on supporting the core pillars of the accounting firm. And our focus has been greatly on accounting and advisory services for the last decade or so. Again, with the advent of the cloud technology, accounting and advisory has really had a head start in being able to advance, moving beyond the compliance and getting into true, insightful foresight that accounting firms can provide to their business clients. What is also wonderful to see is that that same advisory level of engagement is also starting to advance into tax and audit. Again, because of technologies like artificial intelligence, blockchain, and so on. So you're really beginning to see how it's changing many of these transactional or even fundamental services of firms and helping to evolve to using the expertise that you as accounting professionals really provide. So what we want to do is let's take a look at what exactly is happening with some of this technology that's driving this change we're seeing today. This is some information shared by Gartner. If you're not familiar with Gartner, they are a leading information technology research and advisory company. And one of the pieces that they've identified that we're pulling out here is that by the year 2030, it is predicted that we should have 1 billion, that's B, billion people, businesses, and things connected digitally, which creates this business design that's blurring digital and physical worlds. So what does that mean, and are you ready? What they help identify is that it really is going to take the contribution of all of the organizations helping to build the infrastructure to create this connectivity. There are wonderful developments that are coming about, but it's going to take complementary industries, or sometimes not even industries that traditionally have been connected, to be able to start working together and build the technology infrastructure within their own organization. And this is what we're seeing as we continue to advance down these digital business phases. Gartner also has annually their hype cycle of emerging technology. And you'll see that there are multiple levels of exactly where we are in the adoption as well as just even awareness of these different technologies. But if we take a look at the peak of the inflated expectations in this curve, take a note on how many of those are technologies that really are being discussed heavily within the accounting profession today. Again, what is blockchain going to do? This is far more than Bitcoin. Blockchain is that ledger of transactions. And when we start looking at audits, that could be transformational. Artificial intelligence, already in the accounting profession. We're absolutely already seeing that. And so how is all of this going to continue to play a role? Well, if we boil down this hype cycle and really take a look at the elements that are quite pertinent to accounting, you'll also see that software as a service, or the cloud-based technologies, really are almost at that plateau of productivity. This is where we know most firms are really spending energy and time to implement, as well as it's giving them that opportunity to grow. So this is where we're going to have our first polling question, and that is, what technologies do you see, or what innovations do you see are going to have the biggest impact on the accounting profession?
Okay, great. So everyone should be seeing the poll question in front of them, and there are 4 options. Go ahead and select which of the following you agree with, and then make sure to click the submit button to make sure that your vote is counted there. I see we've got more than half of people have already voted here, which is great. We'll give about 10 to 15 more seconds here. Just a reminder, this is the first of 3 poll questions today, and voting in each of the 3 poll questions is required in order to earn CP credit. All right, so we're up to just about 90% of people having voted. So why don't we give 5 more seconds here for everyone to get their votes in. All right, going once, going twice. Okay, so Samantha, cloud technology leads the way at just under half, followed by artificial intelligence, and then blockchain and data analytics pretty far behind.
Absolutely. So this is not surprising at all to see this, because especially when we think about cloud-based technology, and again, the topic of today being client accounting advisory services, cloud technology has been instrumental in the advancement of this particular service line. Artificial intelligence, it doesn't surprise me to see 30% of you are saying that that's going to be the most transformative, because I agree, it's going to continue to automate so much of what has been traditional basic level work. You're seeing it in the legal profession, and you've already seen it come into tax preparation and in auditing. So it's fascinating to see where artificial intelligence is going to continue to go as well. But the cloud technology, I agree, that has been an instrumental part of the service already. And Deloitte even did a survey in 2016 on global outsourcing. You'll notice that one of the categories that came out of their survey is cloud technology, and that a couple of things that it's doing to transform the processes. One, it's accelerating the speed to value. It's, again, giving you the opportunity to offer services that traditionally you didn't necessarily have the time to do because you were so focused on the transactional level work. But that can be automated away so much of the time at this point. It also reduces implementation times, which is absolutely true, and leveraging your technology vendors to help assist with that. And more technology vendors are getting more involved in that as opposed to, here it is, figure it out. And then it also improves functionality. You have access to tools today that didn't exist even 5 years ago. So you have the ability to now offer services that you didn't have that at your disposal, or certainly would take time for you to custom design it. But going beyond the cloud technology, what's also interesting about the outsourcing, and that's very much what client accounting is that it's not just about cost arbitrage. Now, I see this a lot in firms, is that they're thinking the value proposition to their clients is that this is a cost savings by not having to have the accounting staff in their businesses. And there is an element of that. But a couple of things that I would point out as professionalization really happening here is that, one, it really helps solve capacity issues in your clients' businesses. And the third point there is that it provides access to intellectual capital. Now, where I see that come into play is that for many organizations, businesses, they may even have a bookkeeper or an accountant on their team, but to have the true insights into what those accounting reports, financial reports are telling them, they don't have access to. Many businesses don't have a full CFO. They maybe don't even have a full-time or qualified controller. And that's where this outsourcing gives you the ability to take so much of the intellectual capital that you have and sell that service to businesses that desperately need that so that they can continue to grow and build their business. Which very much leads into that last section there, that it's creating new opportunities for service providers. So you can improve the quality of your service, and it certainly allows you to innovate in what's driving revenue within your firm as well. CPA.com, as well as AICPA's section member group PCPS, does a biannual MAP survey, a practice management survey. And we are focusing heavily on understanding what is happening with true client accounting advisory services within firms today. A couple of statistics that stand out that I'll share from that overall survey. One, the adoption of cloud computing is continuing to grow. Now, that's not just for the client accounting, but overall. And what we saw is that it grew from 2014 to 2016 by 17%. My suspicion is that there may even be higher growth there because of the fact that so many of us use technology or cloud-based technology, and it's become invisible to us. We're not even cognizant of the fact that we're using it. Now, how could that be, you may ask? But just think of your use of smartphones, tablets. We don't necessarily even register in our minds that we're using cloud-based tools. So my suspicion is that that might even be a little bit higher. But the other component of this is that in the measurements we were doing on how growth of client accounting services is taking place, we really saw that this is growing across all the firm segments. However, we did see that there was increased growth in your larger firm segments. An example is that a firm that's making, say, $10 million saw in 2014 that client accounting services was about 3.9% of their firm's fees. Yet in 2016, they're stating that it's about 9% of their firm's fees. So there, we're seeing that that growth represents about $500,000 in firm fees. This is great growth, especially when you compare it to how some of the other traditional services have been growing or having incremental growth. This is really showing a big leap and the opportunity that does exist. So it really emphasizes the fact that we are seeing this professionalization of client accounting. And what we really mean by that is that with this professionalization, there's now training and certification that's taking place. There is market demand that's growing. As I mentioned, you're seeing this even being highlighted outside of the publications in the accounting profession. There's dialogue taking place. Firms are establishing specific strategies on how to build out their client accounting. They're changing their branding. Some firms have even changed their entire firm's name and value proposition that they convey so that they're really emphasizing the advisory level as opposed to having clients see them as that traditional accounting compliance-oriented firm. You'll see standards changing. And I said that in the past tense, but it's really already happened. With standards like SARS 21, that a big driver to that was cloud-based technology in this murkiness that developed on who's producing the financial statement. When we're working in the cloud and the accountant and the client are using the same database, what is the engagement? And so SARS 21 addresses that and affords the CPA firm an option to really do true preparation service and not be driven into attestation. I've already talked about the media coverage, the adoption curve we touched on, and I just shared some of the growth numbers that we're seeing. So before we get too much further into this, let's make sure that we're all thinking about client accounting advisory the same way. What is it? What are we saying this includes? Because here's the other piece. It comes by a lot of different names. And that's one of the challenges and yet opportunities that really do exist. So what we're seeing is that in client accounting services, there can be confusion there in firms and clients saying, you know what, we've always had that. We've done that for years. What are you saying is different? So it takes definition. But then there's the use of the term business process outsourcing, and that's very common. Financial accounting outsourcing, or just accounting outsourcing. So there are a number of different names that you can refer to this as, but it's really up to you to be able to help define what's included in that service. The perception is that client accounting services is bookkeeping, write-up, or after-the-fact accounting. That is not what we're referencing here. That is not what we are calling client accounting services. Now, they are part of client accounting, most definitely, because you need the transactional work. You need those financial reports. Hands down, that is absolutely part of the service. But now you may be more intrinsically involved on a daily basis, as well as on a maybe just a weekly basis, but you are involved in what is happening accounting-wise within that organization. You might be more involved in the accounts payable and receivable functions. Like I said, actually helping to design what their business processes are for their accounting procedures. And really what firms are striving towards is getting to this virtual CFO, virtual controller, and being the trusted business advisor. Those three are your highest value, your highest level that you can get to, and that's what technology cannot automate away. That's where your professionalism can really come into play and brings the highest value to your clients. So if we look at it this way, on this grid, if we're thinking about our services as purely, again, compliance-oriented and transactional, you're in the lower left portion of this quadrant. As we just talked about with the trends in technology, that automation is only going to continue to drive forward, which means if you're staying at that level of service, it does drive more fee pressure, as well as it is more commoditization of those services. So if you're looking at your North Star and you're choosing your service of how it's going to be spelled out within your firm, you want to have that vision of being in the upper right quadrant. Because in that upper right quadrant is where you get to capitalize on the highest value and margin that you're providing, but it's also where you're going to be able to specialize and be able to show your expertise and the value of what your assets and your skill sets really provide to businesses. So it's time that we need to take a look at how you evolve your accounting business model. I said it a moment ago, it's about innovating within your own organization on how you are going to start to drive revenue. And so with that, I'm not going to go through all of these pieces. As Viv pointed out, you absolutely can pull down these slides and take a look at this closer. But when we take a look at what you need to define, first and foremost, it's what I've been referencing, is that you need to redefine what your bookkeeping or your accounting services look like today. How are you redesigning and re-articulating to clients what it is and what you are providing to them? What you also need to make sure that you're pointing out and highlighting is that there's a focus on a niche. When you are strictly focused on historical reporting and compliance, it's a bit easier to have a general approach, and we provide these services across many industries. But when you're looking at client accounting services today, what you need to take a look at and consider is that you are now going deeper into the organization. You are getting more involved in what are those key performance indicators. You are helping to create that insight and suggestion of what information is most applicable to help with the success of that business. And so with that, you have to be able to build your expertise and be able to go deep into an industry. That's very hard to go that deep and spread it across many different industries. So that's why in your definition, you have to be thinking about what's your niche? Where are you going to be focusing? Another one in the creation is that you have to develop that partnership with your cloud-based companies. There are wonderful tools out there for you. You need to find the one that pairs with this redefinition of what your accounting is, and that's going to give you the best support for that. You also want to be focusing in, like I was just mentioning, on the output. What is it that you're providing as part of this service? Are you providing more than the financial statements? Are you giving the client timely dashboards, the KPIs I just mentioned? What's part of that output as part of this service? In the delivery, we just talked about the niches and having that vertical specialties. That's part of what the delivery is. And then you need to scope out, as part of this business model, where are your channels to get in front of that client to illustrate the expertise. We're not trying to just share this with everybody anymore. You are able to really find what your target is, what's your niche, where's your specialty going to be able to most benefit a business. And then with that, we're able to go ahead and go find where those clients are across the country. And in some niches, you may be doing that globally. And with the capturing, here are a couple of really important pieces too for internal within your organization. One, you need to be focusing on the training and the new skills you need to build out in your team. As I work with a lot of firms across the entire country and have done this for many years, one of the key things is that you're going to need to build in your team some new soft skills, Help them with their questioning. Help them dig in as they're talking to a client. It gets uncomfortable. It really does when you're trying to push a client on, no, really, what are your goals? They haven't had to articulate that quite enough. And your staff and your team is going to help with these businesses' success by getting there. So there are skills that you want to help your team build up and be effective at doing. The other is that you really need to change the way you bill for this service. I see this in too many firms that what they're trying to do is still bill based on an hourly basis. When clients know they're being billed on an hourly basis, they are going to be resistant to call you and actually look at you as that advisor because they know it's just taking away at the cost. But when they understand, here's the amount we're going to be billed, we come to you with these questions, we're going to have these conversations that are really about the future and not always about the history, that's when you develop that advisory position in the mind of your client, and you get to have that pricing correct so that you're still being profitable with this, but you're not billing it by the hour. And it does take practice. This is not one you're going to get right off the bat. I haven't seen anybody do that yet, but you want to keep working that, and you really do need to move to a value pricing proposition to your clients. So there are other elements here that you can take a closer look at. And actually, before we continue, let's go ahead and have the next CPE question come up, which is how many of you are offering the client accounting services as we just talked about them today? So this will give me an idea of where all of you are.
Okay, great. So the question should be open for people right now. Please select one of the options and then click the submit button. Samantha, we also had a question come in. Shelley asked, how do we get banks and other users of financial statements to accept these new preparation levels?
That's a fantastic question. And I've had this multiple times before. You know, what some of the firms have done is actually go out into their community and do a seminar with the banks, just explaining what that legend on the statement is or what that footnote is, and explain what that really means. Because some of the question has been with the template language that you see with SARS 21, specifically Section 70 for the preparation services. Some people will say, well, it looks like there's absolutely no assurance and so forth. But the fact of the matter is, how different is that from compilation as well? So it's really about the education, and that's what some firms have done. And they said that that has really been a value add in their community and has formed some good relationships with the banks. I even just did a presentation with a banker and a practitioner, and then somebody that was on the committee that helped with that standard. And the banker absolutely said that. They appreciate the accounting profession coming to them and helping to inform on some of these changes. So there are a number of ways that you can do that, but that's one that it benefits you, it benefits your community, it benefits your clients, and it really helps with understanding these different options. And that can be true as well, not only for the footer on the statements, but if you're also looking at using different accounting frameworks depending on your clients. So if you have smaller clients, is FRS for SMEs a much better fit than GAAP? It just takes the explanation of that to the lenders. So I hope that answered that question.
Great. So let's go ahead and I'm going to close out the poll question in just 5 seconds here. So if you haven't voted yet, please go ahead and do so. All right, so we'll go ahead and close that out here. Okay, so we had Samantha, 38% said somewhat. We offer basic bookkeeping write-up services. 30% said yes, we offer controller, CFO. And then 17% said considering, 15% not doing it.
Okay. So we've got a good spread happening here, and that's fantastic because I really hope then this next section is going to help with how you go to that next level. What you're seeing now is this is a breakdown that was done by Dr. Jeffrey Moore. If you're not familiar with him, he is a renowned business strategist, and he did a study of the accounting profession a few years ago. He identified 3 major trends that were driving this transformation in accounting, and those 3 trends you're seeing here: digitization, virtualization, and transformation. And in the white paper that's in your handouts, you can read more about what those 3 trends are. But what he also said is that as a result of that, you see this evolution of really taking place in the client accounting services. And so there are 4 stages that your practice will go through to develop a client accounting practice of today and in the future. The first is the necessary evil. So it looks like for a little over 30% of you, this is where you are right now. And when we look back to the slide we covered just a moment ago on the business model, you're in your definition stage right here. So what we're saying and what Dr. Moore is saying is that when you're at the necessary evil, you have 3 options. 1, you can decide right now that you are going to go ahead and hold steady in offering traditional accounting service. But you'll notice it's a little longer because this is not where we are seeing you're going to be able to hold out for the long haul. The second is that you can decide if this is not for you and you want to subcontract that out. When we looked at the 4 core pillars of the accounting practice, maybe you look at that and say, I am far more excited about tax and where that's going, and I want to be on that bandwagon. And you know what? The accounting's just not for me, and I want to go ahead and subcontract that out to a firm that is their specialty. That's option number 2. Option number 3 is what the majority of you on this call indicated that you're probably doing. So 38% of you said that you're doing some basic accounting and accounting work. So you got to decide if you're going to start making that transformation. And 30% of you said you're already doing this. So with the proactively establish a dedicated practice, let's take a look at what that means. You have to have a strategy around this. Again, we went through that in the business model elements. And first and foremost is that you need to target a clearly defined segment that you're going after. I explained this when I was on the slide about the business model. This is key. And I see a number of firms skip this step and they try to just develop client accounting services and just let's market to everybody and not pick a focus. You're going to struggle with that implementation in scaling your advancement of that business line. Again, this is something I've seen over many years, and I can attest it's going to be a challenge for you. Now, if you're a larger firm, maybe you can do that because you've got more resources across many different industries, and you can start doing multiple industries at one time. If you're a smaller firm, you're really going to need to pick those couple of specific ones that you're starting with. And take a look at really what you specialize in and how your services are differentiated. That can be hard to do, I understand, and we get a lot of questions on this too. But one of my favorite examples that I witnessed personally in a firm was a smaller organization that was in the Midwest, and they really looked at what does our firm do well? Where do we excel? Where do we differentiate? And one of the things they noticed is that they, in their office, spoke 8 different languages. 8 languages in a small firm. Well, in their state, they were bringing in a lot of international business owners to start up businesses. So the way they looked at their specialization and how to differentiate is they became experts on the paperwork that needed to be filed and how to bring those businesses in, and then they were able to use their language skills to speak to them in their native language, making it much more comfortable, more effective in that whole transaction and building that relationship. I just think that's such a wonderful example, like I said, that I witnessed myself in a very small firm. And so with using that as an example, each of you can look at where are those areas of expertise. Do you have an expertise in sales and use tax? E-commerce, there's so much that's happening in that area. So take a look, and maybe it's time to do a SWOT on where those specialties exist. Something else to keep in mind with this is that when you're trying to establish what your target is that you need to keep these 3 principles in mind. One, is the target or the niche that you're picking big enough to matter? You don't want to pick something that's too small that you really can't use that as one of your core services that you offer your practice to. 2, is it small enough to lead? So an example there is when I talk to firms about what's your niche, many firms will say, you know what, we work with a lot of nonprofits, and so we'll do nonprofits. That's a fantastic niche because it really is an industry that oftentimes needs your skill set. However, look at the diversity in nonprofits. Are you doing faith-based organizations? Are you doing governmental? Are you doing charter schools? The needs and your workflow and the tools can be wildly different, but they're all nonprofits. And so that's why you need to make sure you're doing something that's small enough to lead. And then we just talked about number 3, about a good fit with your crown jewels. What ties well into the mission, the vision, and the specialties and differentiation of your firm? So once you've done that, now it's about expanding your practice. And like I just mentioned in the second bullet on the last slide there, you have to design your workflow. We cannot do each of these clients on an ad hoc basis. So when we are saying build out a niche and develop your specialty and get it so that you can provide advisory services, that means you need to create automation within your practice so that you have a very streamlined workflow to be able to capitalize on then the time that you can spend with clients. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not about the transactional conversation, but it's about the goal setting, the foresight, the insight that you and the client can really be looking at for their business. You also need to re-engineer your internal communications and the way you collaborate with your team. So what I mean by that is that you may start working with teams and or clients in a virtual environment, especially if your niche is going to be national. If your firm is on the East Coast and you're going to have clients on the West Coast, or maybe even Hawaii and Alaska or global, this is a great opportunity to allow that flex schedule and have staff members that maybe they really prefer to work from 10 to 7 or whatever it might be, so that they can be available to those West Coast hours. And it's really what works better for them as well. The tools are there, but it does make communication more complicated. So you need to take a look at that. The good thing is again, there are great tools that can help you with that. And I think you even had some other speakers in your webcast, your expert webcast series that address some of those. So that might be something to go and look back at if you're not familiar with those. The other piece is to make sure you're familiar with where these clients are. Where can you reach them? How can you reach out to them? Be familiar with the digital channels, and we have to get out of the mode of thinking that we need to meet with all clients face-to-face. Not necessarily the case. And then expand the geography of where your clients are. And we've really been talking about that as we've been going along. So the last stage is, now that you've got your workflow all designed, you know who your target is, you've got your systems in place, it's about deepening that practice. It's about being able to truly Build it out and mature it at this stage. And what do you need to do at this stage? This is where we focus on the dialogue with your clients and making it more about the advice and the advisory items. This is where you also need to make sure that you're leveraging the technology and you are giving your clients dashboards, key performance indicators. Go outside the norm on those KPIs. What's important? So one firm that I know working on restaurants, a KPI that they may focus in on is actually watching the weather. And so on rainy days or cold days, how does that affect the table turn and the business that's coming? Or is it on those days that they're seeing an increase in their Uber Eats? And if you're not familiar with Uber Eats and you have restaurant clients, I recommend do a quick Google search on that. Become familiar with it, because that's really changed a lot of restaurant clients. And now they have receivables. Now they have inventory for takeout containers. It changes their cost of goods. They don't have the wait staff serving. So many different dynamics. But that's where you can really come up with great key performance indicators that show your knowledge of their industry and help them to better succeed in their business. That's where I was just talking about. Make sure you're educating yourself and your team on that market and that segment and industry, and then get involved in that industry so that that industry is seeing you as that expert. As I mentioned, there's a lot of talk about being the trusted business advisor or being the client accounting advisor. And Joey Havens, who's a managing partner of Horn, wrote this in a blog, and I felt like it was so appropriate. And what he really said is that, what would a true trusted advisor look like? How would you define that? It really is the exception rather than the rule when we see a true trusted advisor in our firms. To be a true trusted advisor, it takes courage, rigor, and being proactive and anticipatory. And that's what I've been trying to emphasize here with this professionalization of CAS. That proactive and that anticipatory is not only important for the way you're interacting with your clients, but it's also about the way you're looking at your own firm. And I think those are key elements, and those are skills for us to work on and to build out. When you're looking at what you want your advisory services to be, here are some of the building blocks of what the service could look like. And what you need to do is decide, at what level do you want to go? Where do you want to take it? It doesn't have to include all of these. Again, look at your specialization. Look at what differentiates you. Look at what the skills are within your firm. But there are many opportunities, including things like human capital management. Payroll is one way to look at that, but there are so many different elements to payroll. We know that Affordable Care Act has been a huge question for employers. And when we take a look at what CFO and virtual CFOs are spending their time on, more and more of it is in human capital management. What does that mean for your potential practice? How does that play into your client accounting advisory services? Maybe right now you're saying not at all, but have it on your radar. Be proactive, be anticipatory of your clients' needs and where you want to take the future potential of your practice. The other piece with this is that typically we focus right here in this center, in the accounting, core accounting elements. But what you want to also consider is, do you want to expand into pre-accounting? Now you might be saying, what does she mean by that? Pre-accounting is starting to get into things like expense management, areas like that. It's the functions questions and it's the data that we have to go get before we can really even start the accounting work. And oftentimes, in many businesses, that information is a mess. And so how can you, from the knowledge that you have and the tools that you know of, can you advise clients on ways to hone and improve that process? The other is that you can start getting more into the post-accounting. Are you doing budgeting? Are you doing forecasting? Are you getting into more, again, planning, KPIs, dashboards, all of that, to be more involved in sharing information to help the client make the appropriate business decision? This is not to say that you are becoming management. And that's another question that comes up an awful lot as we talk about that. What about independence? Doesn't this mean that we are now in the management role? You don't have to be. You absolutely can offer these services and still have that bright line between the two of you. It's all about what is your vision and what do you want these services to be. The other key factor is you now need to get the folks in your organization on board with you. Maybe that's one other person. We absolutely have firms that are very small doing this level of service. And some of you may have national firms that now you need to get them having this same vision of what is the future of client accounting looks like in our practice. To help with that, here's a definition that was put together by a Pulitzer Prize nominated author by the name of Nicholas Carr. And he really identifies here that the trusted advisor's role, it transcends the routine. And I hope you've gotten that from what we've talked about here today. You develop the specialized knowledge. You stay ahead of the automation wave. You be a valued expert and provide the insight. And the most important is that you're translating data into actual wisdom. I had the opportunity last fall to hear the co-CEO of Oracle, Safra Katz, speak at a conference, speaking to a group of women accountants. And I loved what she said here because I think it's so profound in the vision that you set for yourself and for your team. If you are still thinking of yourself as the back office, if offering accounting services is referred to as the back office, you need to stop. Because the value you bring is so much more than that. And what she said is that because of the insights you have and the need that the business leaders have for what you know, you are actually right up front and you are navigating the direction of that business. You are not the back office. You are not looking out the rear view mirror. You are absolutely helping to set the course. And this is what we're seeing. So the move to relevancy has never been more critical. And this is our last CPE question. The question here is, are you worried about the relevancy of your services going forward? So I think Div's going to open that poll up for you. Div, did I lose you? Oh, okay.
Nope, I'm back. Okay, so let me go ahead and pull up the third poll question here. Folks, you should have it in front of you. 3 options this time. Go ahead and select which one applies to you and then click submit. Also, a couple of questions came in here, Samantha. One was, should you target niche industries or niche business life cycles, i.e. startups?
That's a great question because especially startups, that one comes up a lot. We know that that's an industry or, like you said, a life cycle in a business that really needs your help. And at the same time, it may be hard for them to be able to pay for those services. So my answer is going to be a little squishy on that one in that, one, absolutely. I do know some firms that actually focus on that. And so they've designed their model to be able to help the startups. And then once they get past the startup phase, they actually refer them to another another practitioner, because they really have their model all around helping startups. And those services might be a little bit more short-term versus engagements where you're getting clients to be with you for years and years to come. It's a great question. So that is one way you can do it. But I'll translate that into another as well, which some firms have said, well, I want my business, what if I focus on small businesses? That one, I don't know that I would say I would go that route. And here's why. Again, small businesses can vary so much. You could have a small business that's a restaurant versus a small business that's a professional service. The procedures and the workflow that you would need to do to support both of those can be so vastly different, and the depth of knowledge that you need so different, that's going to probably be pretty hard. So I don't mean to kind of answer both ways, but that would be what you want to take into account.
Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll here in just 5 more seconds. So folks, if you haven't yet voted, please go ahead and do so. Going once, going twice. All right. So Samantha, 72% yes, working to identify opportunities to increase relevance.
Absolutely. I think that's wonderful to hear, because really how we started this, technology is not going to scale away. It's just not. And is there always going to be a need for those in the finance and accounting profession? Absolutely. But when I look at even my 17-year career and how it has changed and what the relationship is and the dynamic is between an accountant and a client, there needs to be an evolution of some of those traditional services. So that's great to see so many that are looking at what does that mean. Because I think for your profitability, and again, continuing to build your practice, I think it's an important thing to think about. How do client demands change? How does technology play a part? So I do encourage thinking in that way. And like we pointed out with what all is contributing to the professionalization of CAS, there is education specifically around client accounting advisory services, or as I just said it, CAS. And so with that, there's actually digital badging, there are classes, there are skills. I know some firms are doing things like putting staff members, their staff accountants, through Dale Carnegie or programs like that, because they want to help them with their questioning skills, maybe presentations if they're doing client presentations, and so forth. You got to look at what's our service, who's involved, what are the skills that we need. But I want to make sure that you do know that there is designed education around this already. And then there's also the conference, which I know Accountantsworld was a part of last year as well, that is focused specifically on this. And so the Digital CPA conference is in December, and we have a large portion of that track is specifically committed to the items needed to build out a CAS practice. So again, just knowing those resources are there for you. The white papers, their links are here. If you misplace the PDF or whatnot, that you can download in the handout section here through the interface, or you want to share the link with somebody else so that they can read the white papers. But these white papers do have some information, again, to help us think about where do you want your practice to go and what do you need to develop. So with that, I'm happy to answer the additional questions that have come up, and otherwise, thank you for your time.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Samantha, for your presentation today. That was really fantastic. We've had great feedback coming in and great questions coming in as well. So folks, if you've got any other questions, please go ahead and submit those right now. I'm going to go ahead and just do a quick closing screen here, and we'll see if this works. Last time this caused an error when we tried to, so if I get cut off, I apologize, and we'll just close out there, but I'll go ahead and try to do this here. And just a reminder to folks, a post-webinar survey will come up as soon as you close out. So please go ahead and fill that out to make sure you receive CP credit.
Excellent. So were there any remaining questions that we didn't get to, Div?
She left.